The CEO of REVO Foods, Simsa, will introduce us to his company. Robin, could you please give us more insight into the company's first product, the plant-based salmon, and into sustainable food production, which is achieving by using a 3D food printer?
Fantastic. It's great for the nice symposium you got together here. Really, really cool to see this thing sort of Croatia happening, and I'm super excited to speak here today. So thank you all for joining in today for a lot of exciting news about the future of meat alternatives. And I'm happy to present what we are doing at REVO Foods. We want to create the future of plant-based seafood specifically, which might be new to some of you, because I'm sure many of you have heard of plant-based meats such as the Beyond Burger or the Garden Gourmet Burger. Those things have existed for quite a while now. But think about the plant-based seafood options in your supermarkets. Are there many? I would doubt it, because right now most of the products are things such as fish sticks or fish burgers, which really capture only a small, tiny percentage of the overall seafood market. Yet we have massive problems in sustainability also with seafood. Think about overfishing. I'm sure every one of you has heard of that by now, or that more and more heavy metals and antibiotics are actually contaminating the seafood that we eat. So it even becomes a health hazard. Actually, salmon, for instance, is already banned from the Baltic Sea. So salmon that is caught in the Baltic Sea, it's not allowed to be sold or eaten in the European Union anymore because of the high content of toxic contaminants in there. Except for in Sweden, they got an exception for this because it seems to have a big market value there for some reason. But we don't think that's the right way to do it. We don't think that people should eat this unfortunately unhealthy foods and these foods which are produced by overfishing, destroying the environment. There must be a smarter way. But the demand for seafood is increasing every year, which shows us consumers really love the taste of seafood. So what we at REVO Foods now are working on is giving the consumers the taste and nutritional value of seafood that they love, but without all of these negative consequences. And we do it by developing new technologies with which we create this seafood 2.0, as we call it. So for instance, we work on 3D food printing approaches. Many people ask us, why do you use 3D food printing? It's so complicated. But the answer is products such as salmon have a very distinct structure and texture. Think of the white stripes between the orange muscle meat. And it is almost impossible to produce something like this with current production methods in food technology. However, the 3D printers were actually created to make such complex structure, and it's the perfect way, we believe, to create whole cuts of plant-based seafood. You can see here a little video of how that works. So this is a printer we developed where, for instance, there can be a mixture of different materials. In this case, two different materials, one with this orange structure and one with the white structure, to combine the products such as a salmon sushi, for example, that you see here on the bottom left. So you can create incredibly realistic structures, but that's not only the only advantage. You can also adapt the process so that during the extrusion of the material, you change process parameters, for example, temperature or shear forces. And this way you can really fine tune the texture within the final product so it becomes really complex. So think, if you bite onto a piece of meat, it doesn't taste the same everywhere. If you bite on one side, maybe it's a bit more stiff, maybe on another side it's more elastic. But these meat alternatives we have right now, they're pretty homogeneous. They taste the same no matter where you bite into it. And here we can finally change this so that it has an incredibly realistic mouthfeel when you bite into them. And that's a real innovation in the creation of plant-based meats. This is something where we have also some patents on, and yeah, I think the product looks pretty good. And 3D printing can not only be used for its serious production of meat alternatives, but it's also great to have some fun with, because it's a really flexible production method. So here we played around with some different shapes, different materials. Here on the bottom left, we wanted to make a meme for Novak Djokovic when he went to Serbia, actually, with the tennis balls and stuff. We didn't do it at the end because it was not so popular, it seems. But you can create everything. Here on the top right is the face of Albert Einstein that we tried to print out of a green salmon material, like green because of sustainability. This was for an art exhibition. We can print our logo. We can print words within the salmon. We can print green sushi, green for sustainable. So there's really hardly any limits for what you can do. We even prepared here on the bottom right is a good friend of mine that is selling ice cream. And we created a salmon flavoring ice cream together. And yes, it tastes exactly as horrible as you would think it does, but it was funny for a little marketing gag. We don't only have this idea in the laboratory, let's say, but we already sell these products. We have a first product, which you can see on the bottom left. It says Lachs aus Pflanzen, which is German for salmon from plants. And this we already sell in supermarkets all over the country, and people actually like it a lot. So we just started last year in November, so less than 3 months ago. And in the beginning, immediately the product was sold out. So it was, I think it's the right time for these kind of movements, the right time, because so many people are thinking about their food choices. And if it's not better to choose more sustainable foods, and I think this actually appeals a lot to these people. And soon we will release a salmon and a tuna spread, actually. For package design, we didn't want to do the average boring thing that smoked salmon has. So if you go now to a supermarket and buy smoked salmon, it's pictures of Norwegian landscapes or a bear in Alaska that catches a fish, but it's like, it's so generic. So we rather worked with some street artists. Here's actually a street artist from Boston that designed our first package, and here one from the US for the tuna spread, just to get a little bit of a fresh touch, because these products, of course, appeal to like a young generation that doesn't want to put up with all the stupid mistakes that we did in food production, I believe, in the past. Regarding ingredients, that's, of course, one of the biggest questions when you buy a food product. What's actually inside it? And I'm happy to say that while there's many products out there that have like a long ingredient list, we only have 13 ingredients, and the main component is, for instance, pea protein, which is known for good health properties, as well as algae extracts, which are also known as a superfood. And of course, plant oils, with which we can reach a high omega-3 fatty acid content, very important for seafood. And things like vitamin B12 for vegans and vegetarians especially. The funny thing about vitamin B12, it's not naturally present in meat or seafood, but animals take it up with bacteria that's in the soil. So also now, if you buy, for instance, meat or beef, they add it synthetically to the feed of the cow. So often people ask us, hey, what you're doing, isn't that artificial? And I always answer, like, look at how meat or seafood is produced right now. There's nothing natural about it anymore. If you go to aquacultured salmon, they add synthetic colorants, they add synthetic omega-3, they add this vitamin B12, blah, 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 antibiotics. That's not natural anymore. There's no way to perceive it this way, we believe. Our goal at the end is not to sell 3D printers, because if you sell an individual 3D printer, it's slow, it's small. You cannot produce production scale. So rather, we want to establish 3D food printing as a new production method of the future by combining multiple of these machines together in a bigger production process. You can see here a little concept video that we made for this. So there, for instance, multiple products are produced by one printer and then transported forward on an assembly line, kind of a conveyor belt, where they transport it to a storage or production area. So one printer right now is rather small and slow. One printer can produce you 2 tons in a month, let's say, and that's not enough to supply a supermarket, something like this. But imagine, one printer is not so expensive. Having 20, 30, 40, 50 of these printers, you already reach a scale which is not even reached by the largest aquaculture salmon producers in the world. So this is really a method by scaling linearly, just adding more printers. And the good thing about this is, normally in food processing, you have downtimes due to all kinds of reasons. Some things break, some machines need to be serviced. And this here works in a plug and play mechanism. That means once a machine needs to be serviced, for instance, you don't need to stop the whole production line, but you rather remove the individual machine that needs to be serviced and attach a functioning one while the whole production keeps going on. So in theory, there's very little downtime actually. Regarding what we have right now, so we have smoked salmon that we release now and tuna spreads, but we actually plan for next products, which are salmon, tuna, and sashimi, and the smoked salmon fillet, and at the same time building a production plan and start a larger scale food production. what do we offer to the world? Like why do companies like us need to exist? First of all, it's a really new experience. There are some companies, but I would say confidently that there's nothing out there yet which really recreates the flavor and texture of smoked salmon like the REVO salmon. So we really created a new product there that does not only appeal to vegans, but also to flexitarians and everyone in between. And it allows you to have this full texture and structure that was unseen before. Of course, no antibiotics, heavy metals or microplastics, a longer shelf life, and much less CO2. So yeah, it's good on many levels, I would say. There's some products that exist right now already. So for instance, there's things like burgers, there's things like spreads, there's things like ground tuna, but salmon is the most consumed fish in the world. We think it's time that there need to be more innovative products in this space. And the market is massive for this. The market for plant-based meats is growing a lot, and the market for seafood is also really big. The European Union is actually the biggest market for salmon in the world, about 5.5 billion euros. There's a lot of money to be made, but plant-based seafood has not seen that much innovation as other meat categories. So the market for plant-based seafood is right now rather small. So some people could say, if the market is so small, why do you develop something like this? But we don't perceive it as the market is so small because there's enough products out there. We rather think there's not good enough products out there. And once the products become better and appeal more to the average consumer, then many people will find it easier to make a switch and say, this salmon tastes great. It's healthy. It's good for me. I would rather eat this than the salmon from the aquaculture. So we already sell the product. We sell it as a startup. You always need to explain how you make money. And I think this often comes from the software companies that define everything. Like people were asking like Facebook, how do you make money, or Instagram or whatnot? And it's more complicated. For us, we sell food. It's pretty straightforward. We sell food to restaurants, to supermarkets, to with online supermarkets in restaurants. And there's also some really exciting future options. So for example, cultured meat is a very interesting research for the future to make meat from cells. And they also require a structuring mechanism. And for this, we believe that 3D food printing is actually pretty ideal. We started our first sales actually last year in summer already with some smaller restaurants in Vienna, where we are based in Austria. And from November on, we started selling in supermarkets also. First in Austria, the next month already in Germany, which is really exciting. And by now we started even in many different countries. So we're already in Denmark, we're already in Spain. And if any of you lovely Croatian people know a good restaurant in Zagreb or anywhere else in Croatia, we would be super happy to hear about it, like to bring it to as many countries as possible, including Croatia. And we have big expansion plans. So right now, already 4 countries, less than 3 months after we first came out, we want to further expand. And for instance, Scandinavia is very interesting because, of course, they have a high seafood consumption. And it just would be fun because most of the seafood consumed or salmon consumed in Europe comes from Norway. And like beating them there with their own product or allowing people to try the better version of salmon, I would love that. We're a pretty big team, we're like growing quite good as a team. We're now 30 team members at our location in Vienna from many different countries. You have all kinds of languages here and all kinds of people. A great team, I think, with experts for 3D printing, experts for food science, experts for flavors, for whatnot. And a lot of team members and growing amount of that. And maybe this is interesting for some of you people. I know that some of you are studying food science or food technology. We're always looking for great people there. So maybe REVO Foods is interesting for you. Work does not always need to be hard and unpleasant. So we also do a lot of fun stuff. For instance, we started a little fashion line, which we sell over our homepage. We sell bags, shirts, and we started it like some months ago, and we hardly sold anything. So maybe we need to do more advertisement, but still it's fun stuff. You want to do some fun things. So REVO Music Records, where we make our own music. Our head DJ or a house DJ is also our chief of operations, who does it as a hobby. So yeah, have some fun while you go at it. If it's interesting for some of you to maybe start a startup one day, I think it's important never to forget this. And also events. Great thing to reach brand awareness, to reach more people. We had really fun events where people tried our seafood for the first time. Actually, 1 year ago, we had the first ever tasting event in the world where people could try 3D printed plant-based seafood. So this is a title nobody can take away from us anymore. Or we had a little event in the street where our office is, not really to the joy of our neighbors, but yeah, it's important to also have fun with yourself. And here are some images of happy people that eat the REVO salmon and they're happy because it tastes great. And I think we really achieved a good product there, and we'll come out with many more. We're already looking forward for the sushi, sashimi, and much more, because we think the way seafood is produced right now needs to change, and there are smarter ways to do it. And I believe that we found one of these ways. Yeah, and with this, I'm happy to answer questions.
Robin, thank you for giving us an insight into your company. It has been very interesting to hear about REVO Foods. It is truly inspiring to see how you succeed in making plant-based seafood sustainable and looking amazing. It is also truly inspiring what your team has achieved last year, releasing plant-based salmon in various markets in Austria, Germany, Spain, and Denmark. Congratulations on that, and let's dive into the questions. Have you tried different kinds of processing methods, cooking, smoking, canning on your product? If so, how did it handle them?
We tried many different processing methods, and we try many ways to upscale this 3D printing approach. Because when you talk about 3D printing, many people have only this small machine in mind, and they always ask us, this can never scale ever. But there's so many ways to fine tune that, to extrude, let's say, more material or deposit more material at the same time, and to optimize the whole production process. So yes, it's not necessarily the 3D printing machines that people know from home, but it's more upscaled versions of additive manufacturing that we see as important going forward for this food printing approach.
Okay, we have the next question. Are the smoked salmon slices currently on the market or fabricated with 3D printing?
Excuse me, sorry, I didn't get that.
Are the smoked salmon slices currently on the market fabricated with 3D printing?
We developed them with 3D printing, but now we found a way to upscale these thin slices by a combination of these additive manufacturing technologies and let's say more traditional technologies. So it's, let's say, a hybrid product, so to say. However, the sushi and sashimi products that we plan to release at the end of this year, they will be fully 3D printed. Again, not with this typical 3D printers that you have in mind, but more of a larger upscaled version of this.
What did you study at school? How long were you working on the REVO before you launched?
I was studying actually food technology and biotechnology, and I have a PhD in cell-based meats. So I was working with cell-based meats before at Tufts University in Boston, which is a really great place. If any one of you is interested in cultured meat, they have a fantastic center for this over there that I can highly recommend to everyone. But while working on cultured meat, I was seeing many problems in the technology, or I couldn't figure out ways to overcome these problems. So after some time, after some years, I figured maybe the technology is not ready yet, and I'm not sure when it will be ready. So I started focusing more on this plant-based meat approach. And I still remember biting into the Impossible Burger. Maybe some of you have tried, it's only available in the US, but I bit into it for the first time, and it was like a revelation for me. I was like, wow, plant-based meat can be so good. There's so much potential there. So that's when I started exploring more these methods, and especially seafood. This was a bit more of a coincidence, but I was really thinking, like, there's hardly any alternatives for seafood. Why is that? There needs to be a reason, and I didn't know. Yeah.
We have
and I started working on REVO Foods we started working on it about 2 years ago.
Also, we have another question. Doesn't the legislation have a problem with calling the product salmon?
No. There is legislation for milk drinks, so you cannot call it oat milk, like Oatly. They need to call it oat drink, which they make very funny advertisements against this. For seafood and even for meat, to our knowledge, there's no such legislation yet. The big agricultural lobby, which is, by the way, the biggest lobby in the European Union, bigger than defense weapons, bigger than the car lobby. They have so much money and they're trying to fight all of this so they can keep going with their unsustainable ways of producing food. But so far they didn't get through, and I think it's thanks to many people who see the changes coming, and change needs to be coming. So no, there's right now no legislation that forbids us to use the word salmon. We can use this word. And talking about these big corporations and legislation, like many people ask us, why can salmon be so cheap if you buy it in the supermarket? And I always say the European Union funds fishery and agriculture with about 3 billion euros per year, every year. So all of our tax money goes into these unsustainable companies to do more harm to the environment. So I say we do not need to have a tax on meat or seafood, a special tax. No, we just need to take back subventions. Why should all of us pay money for this? I don't get it. I don't think it's smart.
And the final question is, do you think you need a background in science to start a plant-based food company such as REVO?
No, but it helps. I think it's a technologically difficult matter. And of course, with a business background, you can theoretically start whatever, but I guess it's harder finding the right people for that.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Can you reach lower price levels than conventional salmon?
Right now, no. And I explain you why. Because there's some companies which existed for decades, for 50 years or something, that have perfectionized every single step of the production process. So they produce at super high scale, very optimized. For us, nothing is optimized. It's all chaos. We're a young startup. Like, we produce small amounts. We certainly do not have, like, if you order, let's say, 1,000 kilogram of a certain ingredient, it costs you so much more than if you order 10,000 kilogram, let's say. So with scaling up, everything becomes cheaper. So as a food startup, in the beginning, it would always be a bit more expensive. But if people like it, if there's demand for it, then it will become cheaper with the time.
Okay, we have another question. How did you mask the pea protein taste? Are the algae extracts added for flavor or nutrition?
And the pea protein taste, yeah, it's tricky. So what you need to know is that all plant proteins, or let's say many ingredients, have a flavor by themselves. So, and it's not necessarily a salmon flavor. It's something which you do not expect when eating flavor, so you do not want to have this flavor. So what we are doing is to try to kind of overlay this flavor with some that are more like salmon. But how exactly we do it, you either need to come to work with us or invest in our company to learn more, because that's part of our IP.
Did you ever try plant-based salmon?
The startup from Israel?
Yeah.
No, I do not think it's available on the market yet. And I think they say that it might be available in the market in 2 years. So I'm really excited and yeah, looking forward, because if it tastes great, fantastic, but it's still some waiting time, I think.
Robin, thank you again for your role in this food revolution. It is amazing how much we can achieve with plants.